If you are a digital marketer or analyst and you want to implement various tracking codes on a website much faster, then you need Google Tag Manager. In this video, I will show you how to work with GTM, how to use it to install Google Analytics, and more. Keep in mind that these tools are constantly changing, so if you see major differences between my video and what you see in your screen, then take a look at the description below the video. There might be a newer version of this tutorial available. So what is Google Tag Manager? The best way to explain it is to show an example. Let's say that you're working for a company, or maybe that's your client's company, and if you have some visibility online, most likely you will have a website, or maybe several of them. To measure the effectiveness of these websites, you would need some analytics tools, for example, Google Analytics. And that's where you join the game. You need to install Google Analytics on those websites. In the old days, or we can call that in a classical way, you would need a developer to do the job. In this case, the developer is responsible for adding tracking codes to the site, maybe sending some additional data, events, and so on. But the developer usually is not very much familiar with analytics tools. That's why he or she asks a lot of questions. For example, when do you want those tracking codes to be activated? What kind of data do you want to send? If you want to send some event data, when exactly do you want to send it to Google Analytics? So after a while, you send messages and emails back and forth, and eventually, the developer confirms that he or she understands the task. So the next step would be for a developer to implement those tracking codes. But usually it takes a lot of time because developers have other priorities. And in most cases, analytics is not their top priority. So you might wait for days, weeks until those tracking codes are added. And that's where Google Tag Manager becomes very useful because it allows you in many cases to speed up the process and manage those tracking codes by yourself. So here's how Google Tag Manager works in a nutshell. You have a website and your developer installs Google Tag Manager on a site. And then you manage your tracking codes inside Google Tag Manager. So basically, when GTM is activated on a site, it activates your tracking codes as well. Of course, based on the conditions that you define in Google Tag Manager. Speaking of benefits, Google Tag Manager has a lot of them. First of all your tracking codes are stored in a single place. So it is easier to find them, to manage them, and to decide when to fire them. Of course, then you're less dependent on developers. This does not mean that Google Tag Manager will replace the developers completely, because in some cases, developers will still be needed. But there will be many more situations where you will be able to add tracking codes by yourself and do that much faster. That's why the third benefit is the speed. Also, Google Tag Manager is very popular. It still continues to grow. This means that there are various learning resources in different formats like blog posts, documentation, videos. There are also various forums, communities. So if you get stuck somewhere, there is a very high chance that you will be able to get help fairly fast. But before we continue, I wanted to give you some quick disclaimer. This Google Tag Manager learning journey will get confusing at some point, and that is okay. Don't worry. Some topics are more technical, but they are necessary for you to learn. So in the beginning of your journey, you will have no idea what you're doing, but then later I will start showing you some things and you will try to repeat them after me in order to understand how this works. And eventually you will become like Neo, who started to believe in his powers, and then he was able to solve various challenges fairly easily. Also, did you know that 85% of you who watch my videos are not subscribed? If you want to stay up to date with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, and if you want to get this kind of videos first, then subscribe to my channel. To get started, go to tagmanager.google.com. If you have never worked with Google Tag Manager before, then you will see an empty list. Let's click Create an Account. Here, there are two main components. We have to configure the account and the container. Account is basically an organization or business, for example, and that business might have multiple websites. So inside the account, we then have to configure containers. One business might have multiple containers. Container is like a bucket where you can store your tracking codes. You might create separate containers for each website that belong to the business, or you might have even one container that will be used on multiple websites, if that of course makes sense in your context. So first, let me enter the account name, for example, Analytics Mania GTM, and then you can select your country. then we will have to create a container. So let's say that I will call it demo container. And in this case, we will be focusing on web tracking. That's why the type of this container will be web. Then let's click create. Then we'll need to accept terms of services and click yes. Now your Google Tag Manager container is created, and this is the code that you will need to install on your website, or maybe your developers will have to install it. We will come back to this later. Right now, let's close it. When you want to access Google Tag Manager, you must have a Google account. This is your Gmail account that you also use to access things like Google Analytics, Google Ads, and other Google products. Then, when you have that, you can create Google Tag Manager accounts. As I've said, one GTM account is for a business. That's a company. And then within each account, you can have one or more containers. If the business has multiple websites, for example, they have a blog, they have a main website, and their structures are very different, and the tracking codes that you're going to use are pretty different, then I would recommend creating separate containers for each website. This is the interface of Google Tag Manager. If you have access to multiple Google Tag Manager containers or accounts, you can select them right here. So click on the container name. And if you have access to multiple accounts, you will see the list right here. And you can click on a particular account. And then here you will see a list of containers inside that account. Then here we have like the main menu bar. And here we have workspace. That's the place where you will be spending most of your time. Then you have versions and admin. Speaking of workspace, this is where you manage your tags, triggers, and variables. Soon I will explain what these are and how are they connected and what are their roles. But right now, the main thing that you would need to know is that tags are your tracking codes that you install in Google Tag Manager. If you want to keep your items in the container tidy, you can put them into folders. For example, you can create one folder for Google Analytics tracking codes, then another folder for Google Ads codes, and so on. Then we have templates. So even though Google Tag Manager has a lot of templates available by default, there are many more tracking tools and vendors that you could install in GTM. So it's very cool that there is a gallery of templates where the community and other vendors can add templates and they will save you a lot of time. So instead of adding just plain JavaScript code to Google Tag Manager, you have a lot of options right here. For example, if you want to add a Facebook pixel, which is also known as meta pixel, you can just add the keyword Facebook and you will see the templates right here. And there are a bunch of them. And once you add a template, then if you go to tags, new, then click tag configuration, you will see those templates right here, because this is right now the list of built-in templates. But if you add templates right here, then you will also have some custom templates. Now, you might be wondering, what is a template? So in a nutshell, it basically is a list of various fields and options that you can insert. So this is a template. Instead of working with the plain code, you have fields like inputs, checkboxes, maybe radio buttons, drop downs, where you can insert certain settings, and then your tag management will be much easier. Because alternatively, as I've said, if you want to add some tracking code and there is no template available, you would need to use the custom HTML, where you just basically paste the code and then that code will do something. But that's enough about tags for now. We will come back to them soon. So as I've said, the workspace is the place where you will be spending most of your time and you will be managing a lot of stuff like tags, triggers, and variables. If you add some changes to the container, those changes will be listed right here in this section. Then we also have the container quality section. So right now the container is not installed yet, therefore there is no data. But this section is designed to give you some alerts or warnings if certain settings are not configured yet, or maybe something is configured incorrectly. Of course, sometimes false positives happen, but there are definitely some warnings that are useful and will help you avoid certain mistakes. So that's about it regarding workspaces. Now the versions. So when you publish the Google Tag Manager container and maybe you launch some new changes, each moment when you publish something, that becomes a new version of the container. The cool thing about versions is that when time goes by and you have more versions here, if needed, you can roll back to the previous version. For example, let's say that today you published some new changes in your container and something broke. There is some mistake that prevents your tags from working. So if that happens, you could then go to the list of versions, find the previous version, then click 3 dots and publish. That way, your previous version will go live to the website visitors and your tracking will start working again. Then we have the admin section. Here you can manage, for example, users on the account level who will have access to what, or you can manage users on the container level. You can also find some settings here, but there are not many of them. Then you will find the Google Tag Manager container snippet or container code right here. That's what you will need to install on the website. And then you can export the container. For example, let's say that you have 2 containers, and on the second container, you want to replicate all the tags, triggers, and variables that you have in the first container. So in the first container, you click export and then export that container. And then on the second container, you go to the admin, click import, and import that file. And that way you will be able to replicate the setup fairly quickly. Then there are several other options right here, but this would go out of scope of this tutorial. So the key essential things are already mentioned in this video. Now, a couple of final things for this part is that in the workspace, when you do certain changes, you can publish them, which means that they will go live to your website visitors. But before you do that, you always have to test this. And this can be done with the preview mode. Soon I will show you how to use that, but right now I'm just kind of describing the process that you will need to follow. You do some changes in the container, you preview them, and once you test this, then you click submit and publish a new container version which will go live to your website visitors. Before you start adding tags, triggers, and variables, first you have to install Google Tag Manager container on your website. And then when the visitor lands on your website, Google Tag Manager will be loaded, and then imagine Google Tag Manager acting as a portal. So through that portal, various tracking codes will be activated to your website visitors based on the rules that you configure right here in the interface. To install Google Tag Manager, click on the container ID right here, and you will get 2 codes. The first one is essential if you want your tracking codes to work. This one is optional. As the instructions say, you have to paste the first code somewhere in the head. So you can copy it, and then the actual installation process depends on how your website is built and what kind of content management system or e-commerce platform are you using. So first I will show you what to do if you are dealing with a custom website. Then you will need to copy this code, and if you have access to the website's code, then you can add the Google Tag Manager container somewhere in the head. So this is the beginning of the head, and this is the end of the head. And then the container code could be added like this. But if you are limited by certain restrictions, or maybe your developer does not agree to add this, and the developer says that he or she will add this somewhere in the body, technically that is also okay. Your Google Tag Manager will still work. But ideally, in my opinion, I usually add it or ask to add it right before the end of the head. So this is where the first code could be added, and then the second code should be added immediately after the body tag. So this is the opening body tag. This might be used for things such as verification of your Google Search Console ownership or for some other things, but the priority of this is much lower. If you don't have the option to add this, this is okay. This is the most important code that must be added to your website. And then once these changes are done, then you would need to click save, and this would go live to your website visitors. Of course, it's important to note that Google Tag Manager container code must be added to all pages of your website. Then another situation might be that maybe you're working with some popular content management system or popular e-commerce platform. So maybe they already have some plugins or built-in functionality to activate Google Tag Manager. For example, if you're working with WordPress, there is a very popular plugin called Google Tag Manager for WordPress. When that plugin is activated, you would then need to go to Settings, Google Tag Manager, and then here you would need to paste your container ID. You can find the container ID right here. Let me zoom in a bit. And it's the same ID that you have right here. So once you have that ID, you paste it right here. then you can go with codeless injection of the no script part, but as I've said, it's not that important. And then you click Save Changes, and this will handle the installation for you. And the third situation that you might find yourself in is that you are working with some content management system, but you don't have access to the code and you don't have access to some plugin because there is no plugin for that particular platform. But maybe you have an option where maybe somewhere in the settings you have a field where you can add custom code. So on this particular website builder, you have a field that says site header code. And here you can paste the Google Tag Manager container snippet. Since we're talking about header, it means that this code will be added to the head. And finally, after you install Google Tag Manager container code, or maybe a developer tells you that the code is added, now you have to test if it is added properly. Even though you have the test your website option right here, personally, I don't use it. I instead go to preview right here. Then I have to enter the URL of the website where I want to test the setup. In my case, I have this demo website right here, and I will click connect. So if Google Tag Manager is installed properly, you will see that Tag Assistant has connected here. And then you will also see at least these 5 events right here. You might see more, which is okay, but you have to see at least these 5 items right here. So this is called the preview mode. And if it does not connect for you, then it means that either installation is done incorrectly, or maybe you have some ad blockers, or maybe there are some other reasons. So if you need to troubleshoot why the preview mode is not working for you, I will post a link to a troubleshooting guide below this video. And one final thing for this particular section is that I would recommend for you to install a Chrome extension called Tag Assistant Companion. It will enhance the capabilities of the preview mode, and it will be a bit more convenient for you to work with it. So I will post a link to it below the video, install it, and then we can proceed to the next topic. Now let's talk about the key components of Google Tag Manager: tags, triggers, and variables. Tags are pieces of code that you add to Google Tag Manager, and then based on your conditions, those tags will fire. Tags can be tracking codes. They might be codes that change the color of the button. They might be some other codes. So basically a snippet of code that you add to your website. Then you need to decide when do you want those tags to fire. That's where triggers are needed. So a trigger is a set of conditions that must be met. And then if that happens, the tag that is linked to a trigger is activated. And then the third component is variables. And when I was learning Google Tag Manager, the relationship between tags and triggers was clear for me, but I was not fully understanding what kind of role are variables playing here. So let me explain that in a bit different way. When I teach the concept of tags, triggers, and variables, I usually like to do that with 3 questions. The first question is, what do you want to do? For example, if you want to track a button click, you need to activate some code. So that code is a tag. If you want to track a purchase, that is a tag. Then the next question is, when do you want to do that? So when do you want to activate the tag? Your example could be when a user makes a purchase, or when a user submits a form, or something like that. So the answer to when is the trigger. And the third set of questions is what, when, or how exactly. And that's where variables are needed, because when you say that you want to fire a tag on the order confirmation page, you need to be more specific. How can you specify the thank you page? Well, with the page URL. So if page URL contains, let's say, thank you for purchasing, the page URL in this case is a variable. Let me show you an example. Let's start with what? A tag. In this case, a tag could be a Google Ads conversion tag. Because what will this tag do? It will track a conversion. When will that tag do this? It will do when a visitor lands on a thank you page, or also known as order confirmation page. And then when exactly, or what exactly, or how exactly. So in this case, the when exactly would be when page URL contains purchase successful. So the page URL in this case is the variable. But also with that conversion tag, we could send the value of order total. How much money did the visitor spend on our site with that purchase? So another variable could be order total. because it contains a monetary value of the purchase. Let me visualize this with the previous explanation where we had tags, triggers, and variables. Now let's replace these words with the actual example. We have Google Ads conversion tag. It will fire on a thank you page. But Google Tag Manager is not human. It's a system, so you need to be more specific. What does a thank you page mean? It basically means that the page URL must contain purchase successful. So the page URL in this case is the variable that we use in the trigger. And then, together with the Google Ads conversion tag, we want to send the order total. So that's another variable. If this still sounds confusing, don't worry. We will soon be using those variables in action, and then you should start understanding this concept better. In this tutorial, the tracking codes that we will be adding to Google Tag Manager will be of Google Analytics 4. But before we do that, here is a very brief introduction to Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a platform that lets you analyze how your users are behaving with your website and your mobile apps. In this tutorial, we will be focusing only on websites. With Google Analytics, you can see how many visitors did you get, where are they coming from, what kind of interactions are they doing on your website, and of course, you can enhance your setup by sending some custom events, for example, form submissions and so on. On the left sidebar of Google Analytics, you will see the main menu, and you will be spending most of your time in the Reports section and Explore. In the Reports section, on this sidebar, you will see a collection of reports. This sidebar is highly customizable, so in your property, you might see a different collection of reports, or if you want, you might even add more reports. In this property, if I want to see where are my visitors coming from, I can go to Acquisition and then Traffic Acquisition. This table will show me the top traffic sources, and many users prefer selecting the session source medium instead. And here we can see that a lot of people are coming from Google Organic Search, also from Google Paid Ads. Also, this particular website is running email marketing, so some people are coming from the newsletters and so on. Each column in this table, except the first column, is showing metrics. For example, we can see how many sessions did we get from each traffic source. Then you can also see how many key events did we get from each traffic source. Key event was previously known as conversion. So certain events for this company are more important. That's why they are called key events. For example, if I click right here, I can see the purchase events, and this is how many purchases did we get from each traffic source. If you have implemented e-commerce tracking, which might require some custom implementation, then you will also see how much revenue did you get from each traffic source. If you want to see your top pages, then you can go to Engagement and Pages and Screens, or maybe it will be located somewhere else, but just keep looking for a report that says something about pages. In this report, we can see which are the top pages, how many times was each page viewed. That's where we are using the views metric. We can see how many users viewed these particular pages, and so on. If you want to check what are the landing pages, also known as the first pages of the session, then you can go to the landing page report. And this is where a lot of visitors are landing. Speaking of the reports and charts, let's go to traffic acquisition. So by default, this chart shows the top 5 traffic sources, and then this dotted line right here shows the total traffic. If you want to analyze just a particular traffic source, then you can, for example, select just organic and check everything else. If you want to keep total, you can keep it as it is, or you can uncheck it and then click plot rows. Now the chart will be showing just those rows that are selected right here. The Explore section on the sidebar contains additional methods that you can use to understand your data. This is a bit more advanced compared to the Reports section, but nevertheless, it's still pretty useful. For example, I usually use freeform, funnel exploration, and path exploration. Let's click on the freeform, and here we will get an example of different cities, and here each column represents a different device category. So this is how many desktop users do we get from New York, then from Los Angeles, and so on. Due to certain limitations, Google Analytics might not always get the location of the visitor, and that's just how our industry right now works. So in that case, if a particular value is not known, then you will have the not set row in your table. Now let's take a quick look at another exploration method. Let's go back to Explore. And if I select Funnel Exploration, it will show me a funnel. In this case, this is a predefined funnel where we have the first open event, then session start, then page view, and then purchase. This does not look very useful, but if you want, you can modify it by clicking a pencil in the steps section. Then we can remove these and build a different funnel where, let's say, the first event will be where the product is viewed. And then an event for that will be view item. Keep in mind that out of the box, Google Analytics cannot track view item or purchase events. You will need to either implement this yourself with a developer, or maybe by yourself if you know how to do that, or alternatively, maybe it is possible that your website has a particular Google Analytics integration that sends this data to GA4. So the first step will be viewed item, then another step will be, let's say, added to cart, and then the event for that is called add to cart. And then the third step, let's say, is begin checkout. An event for that in this property is begin checkout. And then finally, we will add a purchase step where the event name is purchase. Now, if I click apply, I will see how many people viewed any product, then how many people out of those added any product to a cart, then out of them, this is how many started a checkout, and then this is how many people completed the purchase. Let's install Google Analytics with Google Tag Manager. Go to analytics.google.com. If you have never worked with Google Analytics before, then you might see a view that looks like this. Here you will need to create an account, property, and then add some additional details. A Google Analytics account, just like it is with Google Tag Manager account, should represent a business. So if you have multiple websites, then you should have one account, and then inside that account, you will have properties. One property can be used by one website, or you can include multiple websites in the same property. But if you already have created an account and you just want to create a new property, then go to admin and then click create property. As you can see, the step related to account creation is no longer here. So let me create a new property. I will call this, let's say, Analytics Mania Demo. Then select the reporting time zone. I will select Lithuania, then the currency. I will select Euro and then click Next. Then you should select your industry category. Right now, I will select, let's say, Internet, and then the business size. Click Next. Then you have to choose your business objectives. The checkboxes right here will affect what kind of reports will you see in your GA4 property. Usually, I'm using the other option right here, and then click Create. Then you will be asked to create a data stream. In a nutshell, data stream is the place where you collect your data, and then Google Analytics will take that data from data stream and will display it in the report. Since we are focusing on the website tracking, we will click Web. Then I will enter the URL of the website. My demo site looks like this. Then I can call this, let's say, website, and click Create and Continue. Then I will get the tracking code, but we will not need the entire code because we are working with Google Tag Manager. So for now, I can just close it. Then here we can see the web stream details, including the measurement ID that we will use, and then certain other settings. If you already have a Google Analytics 4 property, then you can find these particular settings by going to, well, actually, let me quickly find that. So I will go to Home. And then if you already have a property, then go to Admin, Data Streams, select your website data stream, and then here is the measurement ID. So this is the most important part for us right now. Let's install this property with Google Tag Manager. Let's go to GTM, and then in the workspace, go to Tags. Then click New, and when you create a tag, you have two sections. Tag configuration, which means what will this tag do, and then triggering, which means when do you want this tag to be activated. Let's start with the tag configuration. To install Google Analytics, you will need to select Google Analytics here and then select Google Tag. Here, you have to paste the tag ID. In our context, tag ID is the measurement ID. So I will copy this, and then I will go back to Google Tag Manager and paste it. Once this tag is fired on our website, it will activate Google tracking code, which is related to this measurement ID. Now, the question is, when do we want this tag to fire? When it comes to Google Analytics, you have to activate the tracking code on every page of the website. That's why we should go to triggering. And then here we have 3 triggers by default. Even though you might be tempted to use all pages, ideally you should select initialization because it fires a bit sooner. Google tag must be the first Google Analytics tag that fires. Later we will create an event tag, but that should fire at least a bit later than the Google tag because Google tag contains some settings that are important for other Google Analytics tags. So select initialization all pages. Then let's name this. For example, I will call this GA4 config and then save it. To test your setup, click Preview in the top right corner. Then you will be asked to enter the URL of the website. Do that and click Connect. Once the Tag Assistant has connected, you can go back to this tab right here. And on the left sidebar, you can see different stages of the page loading process. Consent initialization is related to certain consent settings. For example, did the user give consent and so on, but this goes out of scope of this particular tutorial. Then we have initialization. That's where we set our tag to fire. And as you can see, if I click initialization, I see in the tags fired section that my tag succeeded. It is possible that instead of Google tag, you see unknown tag type. Don't worry, this is a bug in the preview mode, but it does not affect how your tag actually works. Then we have other page loading steps. For example, this is related to the Google Tag Manager container. Then this is related to when website elements on a page were rendered. And then window loaded means that all tracking codes and all scripts in general on your website and all resources have loaded. If you sometimes see this warning, don't worry, you can just go back to the website and Google Tag Assistant will reconnect. At the top of the Tag Assistant, you can see what kind of Google's resources were loaded. So you have Google Tag Manager container, but since Google Analytics was also loaded, you can see that right here. And if you click it, you will see what kind of things related to Google Analytics happened on the website. So when GA4 was loaded, it sent a page view to GA. But now let's go back to the container. If certain interactions happen on a website and Google Tag Manager is capable of tracking them, those interactions will be available here. Right now we have 5 Google Tag Manager events, but as you progress, you will learn that there can be more right here. When you select a particular event, for example, initialization, you can see what kind of tags fired and did not fire. Right now we just have one tag which fired, so we see it right here. But if I click on DOM ready, on this particular event, our tag did not fire. But this is expected because we want our tag to fire only on initialization, and that's how it behaves. Then, if you want, you can also switch while having the event selected to variables. These are Google Tag Manager variables that are available in your container, and you can see what kind of values did they contain at that particular moment, because their values might change as you navigate between different events. Then there is data layer tab, but this topic is a bit too advanced for this particular tutorial. Then we have consent. Again, this goes out of scope of this tutorial, and then console. So if a certain tag did not fire, maybe it threw some error, then take a look at the console. Maybe you will notice that the console shows some error that will give you more information why a certain tag failed. Anyway, let's go back to the Google Analytics tag. On the initialization, our tag fired. If you want to see why it fired, you can click it, and then here you will see the firing conditions. If there is a green check mark, it means that that particular condition was met. This is displayed as a technical variable, but you can switch from names to values to see what happened. And we see that GTM init, which is a technical name for initialization, equals GTM init. This condition was met, therefore our tag fired, and this Google tag was loaded. Now, the next step of the testing process depends on what kind of platform you're working with. We are working with Google Analytics, so even though the tag fired here, you always must check if the data actually reached its destination. In our case, that's GA4. So if you have enabled Google Tag Manager Preview Mode, the tag has fired, then the next step is to check Debug View in Google Analytics 4. It is a dedicated section to check the incoming data. So let's go to Google Analytics, and then go to Admin Panel and keep looking for Debug View. In my case, the Debug View still does not show anything. With new properties, that might happen. I don't know the exact technical reason, but maybe there is some delay. In that case, it might be a good practice to just try to refresh the page, maybe try to refresh the Debug View. If that does not help, then you might need to wait for a bit, and then eventually that event should appear. And as I speak, as you can see, we got the events. All of these events were tracked automatically. So this is our first visit that was tracked by this property. Then there was a page view and the session started. Then I refreshed the page. Therefore, I also have another page view right here. If I click it, I can see what kind of information Google Analytics tracked automatically, including page location, which is the URL visible right here. Also, there are things such as page title, which is visible right here in the tab. So that was the testing process in general. If you are working with another platform, for example, Metapixel or maybe another vendor, then this final step, which is related to debug view, might differ. Some vendors might have real-time debugging features, some might not. So it depends on what are you using. But when it comes to Google Analytics, always check if the tag fired, and then always check if that data is visible in the debug view. By the way, did you know that I have a bunch of free ebooks on Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics? So if you want to better learn these topics, then click the link below the video, download those ebooks, and get started. Once you made sure that your setup works, the next step is to publish these changes live. Because right now, what you're doing here and whatever happens in the preview mode is happening only to you in your browser. Your website visitors who might be browsing the site, they are still not getting Google Analytics tracking code loaded to them. So to make these changes public, you need to click Submit, and then this will create a new version. It's a good practice to give at least a name to the version, because later, as the time goes by, you might have tens or hundreds of versions. So if you don't give names to versions, you will just see version 1, version 2, version 3, and it will be difficult for you to find when a particular change was implemented in the container. So give it some brief description, for example, installed GA4, and then click Submit. Once the container is submitted, a new container version will be created. Previously, we were working with version 1. Now it's version 2. And if we go to the versions tab right here, we will see that the current version is live. Live means that this is live to your website visitors, and latest means that this is the version that you're working with in the workspace. If something goes wrong and, for example, this version broke something and you have to quickly roll back, you need to complete two things. The first thing is that you will need to publish this, the first version, click 3 dots, publish, and then hit publish right here. Then the previous version will be loaded to your website visitors. And then if you want to redo certain things by using the first version as a basis, then click 3 dots right here, set as latest version, and then set as latest version right here. You might get also a notification to update the workspace, so do that. And then what will happen is that all the items from the version 1 will become available in the workspace, and you will not have items from version 2. Or if you just want to quickly fix something in the version 2, then again, publish the first version, then do the changes in the version 2. And once you publish by hitting the submit button, that will create a new third version. So each time you publish, it will create a new container version. And now, as I have installed Google Tag Manager container and some data is flowing, now it tells me that the container quality is excellent. If you go to tags in Google Tag Manager, click New, and then Tag Configuration, you will see a bunch of different tag templates available. However, they don't cover all the possible use cases that you might have. For example, what if you want to implement Facebook Pixel, which is also known as Meta Pixel? So you could try to use the search feature and then keep looking for Facebook or Meta, but you won't find any because these are predefined by Google. Luckily, there are other options how to install tracking codes. For example, you could go to the community template gallery. You can either go to it by clicking here, or you can go to templates and then in the tag templates section, click search gallery. It will open the same thing. Here you will see a huge list of various templates built by the community. Let's say that you want to install Facebook Pixel. Then you can click Facebook, select, for example, this template, then add to workspace, add, and the template will be added right here. From this moment, if you go to tags and click new, in the tag configuration, you will see Facebook Pixel in the custom section. This tells us that this was added from the gallery. And now if I click here, then I could enter certain settings and then fire this pixel, for example, on all pages or initialization all pages. Now, we are not going to look into what you should enter in these particular fields because that goes out of scope of this tutorial. But my goal in this section is that I want to show you that you can add custom templates to your container if you have a need for that. Now, there might be some situations where you looked at the built-in list of tags and there are no templates. Then you went to the gallery, but inside that gallery, you also don't see that particular template, even though you used the search feature. So in that case, you can add custom JavaScript code with the custom HTML tag template. So let's go to tags, new tag configuration, and here you have custom HTML. So the code here can be JavaScript, but it should be surrounded by script tags like this. Or maybe you already got some custom code that already has them. In that case, you don't need to enter them once again. Let me show you a very simple example. Let's say that I want to add a banner at the top of the page that says something about a sale. Now, ideally, these kind of codes should be added directly to the code of the website, and that should be done by a developer. Because keep in mind that Google Tag Manager can be blocked for certain visitors. If they are using some ad blockers or other extensions that are more privacy focused, then Google Tag Manager will not load to them, which means that whatever you have in the container will not be displayed or will not work for them. But if you have this in mind and you think that this is still better because the developer right now is not available and he cannot add that code, then here's a code snippet that I have. This is just a very basic example that could be added to the website. However, another caveat is that you really must know what you are doing, because just blindly copy pasting some code that you found online or that was generated by AI, it can break your website. So if you have some code that is thoroughly tested, it works well, and your only option to add it to the website right now as a temporary solution is Google Tag Manager, then you can use custom HTML tag. So this will add a banner at the top of the page saying something about a Black Friday sale. Now, in the triggering, let's say that I will fire this on all pages, and then I can call this CHTML, which stands for custom HTML, and then promo banner, for example, and hit save. Now, if I click preview, the page will reload. The tag fired, this time it fired on container loaded because all pages trigger means all container loaded events. And again, ignore this unknown tag type. After a while, maybe after several minutes, this will be displayed properly if I refresh the preview mode again. And now on the website, I have this bar right here. But as I've said, just a reminder, ideally, these kind of things like banners or chat widgets or whatever, they should be added directly to the source code of the website by a developer. We are using Google Tag Manager here as a temporary duct tape solution because we don't have any other options how to quickly add a banner. So we accept the risks that for some visitors, this banner will not be displayed. And then once we made sure that everything is working fine, the code is working, then we can publish a new version by submitting the container changes. One last thing for this section that I wanted to mention is that, as you can see from this example, not all codes that you add to Google Tag Manager have to actually track something. This code does not track anything. It just adds a particular element to the page. So when it comes to tags in Google Tag Manager, you should think that basically they are snippets of code that do something. That something might be related to tracking, but it can also might be related to other situations or other goals that are not related to measurement. Every interaction that Google Analytics tracks is called an event. And when it comes to event tracking, there are several types. First of all, Google Analytics will track several events automatically, such as session start or first visit or user engagement. Then there is a feature set of other events that Google Analytics can track automatically, and that is called enhanced measurement. If you want to see what kind of events can be tracked by enhanced measurement, go to Google Analytics, then admin, then data streams, select your website data stream, and here you will see the enhanced measurement section. By default, it is enabled, and if you want to see what kind of events are tracked, you can click this icon. So out of the box, Google Analytics can track when someone scrolls below the 90% of the page height, then when someone clicks a link that redirects visitors to another website, then site search, form interactions, although I have to admit that this is not very accurate. That's why I usually keep this disabled. Then it can track embedded YouTube videos on your website and can track when someone clicks a link that downloads a file. And there are certain file types supported like PDF, Word documents, Excel, and so on. So since I disabled form interactions, I will click Save. Now let's take a quick look at how this works in action. I have already enabled the preview mode. Maybe I should refresh it to fetch the latest version of the container. And then here I can scroll down to the bottom of the page like this. Then if I go to the debug view, then I will see that event right here. I can click it, and one of the parameters which is related to this particular event is percent scrolled, which is 90%, because that's when this event is automatically tracked. But these automatically tracked and enhanced measurement events obviously don't cover various use cases, such as purchase tracking, add to cart, and so on. For that case, Google has a list of recommended events. These events are not tracked automatically, and you would either need to implement some custom setup, or maybe your website has a deeper integration with Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager, and these events could be tracked. Below this video, I will post a link to a documentation about recommended events. This is the list of events that you could implement on your website, and Google recommends that you do so. For example, if you want to track purchases, your event should be called purchase. And if you want, you can click it to see what kind of additional parameters you can send with them. So all of these are recommended. Some of them are required if you decide to implement this. For example, currency is required. You don't have to follow this naming convention, for example, when it comes to form submission tracking or login, but when it comes to sales, I would say that you must use these kind of event names. For example, purchase, add to cart, view item, because these event names affect certain metrics in Google Analytics. And if you implement something else like order complete, then your revenue metrics will not be populated properly. And then if you have some event in mind that you want to track, but it is not covered by automatic event tracking, enhanced measurement, or it is not mentioned in the list of recommended events, then there is a fourth group of events, which is called simply custom events. For example, if you have a booking form on your website and you want to track when your visitors book a call with you, then you could come up with a custom event name, which is, let's say, booking confirmation or something like that. The only thing that I would emphasize here is that when you track custom events, their naming convention should be similar to what Google is already doing, which means that event names should be all lowercase, and then instead of spaces, you should be using underscores. And then finally, when you implement event tracking, and by the way, we will soon look how can we do that with Google Tag Manager. So when you collect event data, that event data will become available in various sections of the Google Analytics 4 interface. For example, you can find the list of events in engagement and events. But as I've said, the sidebar is customizable. So in your case, maybe you have another location where this event is located. But keep in mind that Google Analytics needs some time to process the data. Even if you have sent event like an hour ago, it will still not be available in the reports. Usually GA4 requires from 24 to 48 hours to properly process the event data. Another location where you can find event data is in acquisition, traffic acquisition, and then here you would see the traffic sources, and one of the columns will be events, but it's not available by default. Probably Google changed that. So if I customized the report and added a metric called event count, no, it is right here. So maybe I missed it. Oh, it is. Okay, sorry. Basically what would have happened is that if you had some event data right here, under the event count, you would see this drop down right here where you could see all events that were tracked by your property. For example, here's another demo property that I have, and here I am still in the acquisition and traffic acquisition. And here I have traffic sources, and one of the columns is event count, and here I can see what kind of events were tracked by the property, and I can click, for example, here and see how many form submissions did I get from each traffic source. Before we learn how to send custom events to Google Analytics 4, first it is necessary to understand the triggers. So let's take a closer look at that. Let's go to Triggers and then click New. Click Trigger Configuration, and here you will see types of events that are supported by Google Tag Manager. These are the 5 page loading stages that you saw in the preview mode. In fact, let me open the preview mode again. This time I will use this, let's say URL, and then click Connect. And if I go back to the preview mode, I will see 5 events: consent initialization, and everything else. So these 5 events correspond with 5 trigger types that we have right here. If you want to fire your tag on window loaded, which means that all resources on the page have been loaded, then you would need to choose this, and then your tag would fire right here. Then we have click related triggers. If you want to track clicks on some links, then you will need to use the just links trigger. But if there are some clickable elements on a site that you want to track and they are not links, then you will need to use all elements. Then, if you want to track when a certain element appears on the screen, there is an element visibility trigger. This might be useful if, for example, you want to track when a success message appears on the screen. Then there is a built-in form submission trigger, but it's not very reliable. So on some forms it will work, but on many of them it won't. That's why I usually use other form tracking methods. One of the examples could be the element visibility trigger, or I can track an event on a page view where page URL contains thank you or thank you for signing up or something like that. Then we have scroll depth trigger. So if you want to track when a visitor scrolls below 50% of the page height, you could use this trigger. Then we have a YouTube video trigger. So it will track embedded YouTube videos on your website. And here you have more customization compared to the enhanced measurement. That's why I often disable enhanced measurement video tracking and I implement this trigger instead. Then if you have some custom event that was made available by a developer on a website, you could use the custom event trigger, but this goes out of scope of this tutorial. Then if the page does not reload, but the URL changes, you can track those URL changes with this trigger. If some unhandled JavaScript errors occur on a page, then you can track that with this trigger. If you want to fire a tag, let's say 30 seconds after the page loaded, you can use the timer trigger. But keep in mind that on every page load, the timer trigger resets. And if you want, you can combine even several triggers into a trigger group. For example, you can fire an event if a visitor spends 30 seconds on a page and scrolls below 50% of the page height. So by combining these two triggers, you can create a trigger group. Let's take a closer look at one event tracking example, and we will do that with the just links trigger. First, I will click this trigger type and we will create a trigger. Right now, it will fire on all link clicks. That's why I will call this all link clicks like that and hit save. Then I will click preview to refresh the preview mode. And then on this page, I have 3 links. I will click the first one. This will open a new tab. Then let's say the second one. And here in the preview mode, I will see 2 link clicks. It is possible that you might see 4 link clicks. This means that one link click is coming from the Google Tag Manager's trigger and the other one is coming from the enhanced measurement if you have enabled some link click tracking features there. But don't worry. In my case, I have 2 clicks because I clicked 2 times, so it's okay. Now, if I click the first one, I will see that no tags fired. That's okay because that trigger is not linked to any tags. We can even see tags 0. But if I go to the variable while I have selected link click, I will not see any click related data. I mean, I don't know what is the text of the link that was clicked, what is the URL. We have the page information, but not click information. However, if you go to the data layer, you will see that info. We have the URL that was clicked, we have the text that was clicked, we even have the class of the link because on websites, elements might have classes and IDs. So it looks like Google Tag Manager can fetch this kind of information. This was made available because we enabled link click tracking features in GTM. But we cannot use this in our tags or triggers because we don't have any variables. Luckily, since we are using a built-in link click trigger, which is just links, we can also use built-in click variables. Let's go to variables. Then in the built-in variables section, click configure. And here we have all sorts of built-in variables that are by default disabled, but we should tell Google Tag Manager that we want to use them in our setup. That's why we will enable all click-related variables. Now let's refresh the preview mode so that we could fetch the latest version. And then if I go to the website, click the link, let's say the first one, and then the next one, I will close these tabs and I go to the preview mode, I will see that on this link click, if I go to variables, I will now have the click information that is available for that link. I see the click text of the first menu link item, then the second text. Their URLs also differ slightly, so this is working fine. On some websites, elements might have classes, so I have this class. I don't have any ID, but on other websites, you might have IDs. But it's also possible that you might not have classes. That's when, you would need to adapt and you would need to learn more advanced topics, but this goes out of scope of this tutorial. And this was the basic introduction to event tracking with Google Tag Manager. You know how to enable event tracking capabilities. In this case, we enabled link click tracking, but now we need to learn how can we send this link click information to Google Analytics. And we will learn that next. Let's continue the previous examples with these links. Let's say that this is a website menu and I want to track every time someone clicks on them. I want to understand which links are clicked the most. I already have enabled the link click tracking features in Google Tag Manager because I have a link click trigger right here. But if I added this trigger to a tag, it would fire on all links on a website. Now I want to track only these links. So let's see what kind of information can we get about these links so that we could narrow our trigger down. That's why, first of all, I will go to Tag Assistant. I will clear this stream right here, and then I will click the first link, second link, and a third link. Now I will close these tabs. I don't need them. And let's go to the Tag Assistant and check those 3 link clicks. I want to find some common things among those links. If I click the first link click and then go to variables, I will see that its click classes is menu link, while other values might differ. For example, the text will differ. Now on the second link click, the class still remains the same. And here, the class also remains the same. So technically, I could make my trigger more precise and configure it to fire only when the click classes equals menu link. So let's do that. I will go to Google Tag Manager, open my trigger, and I will make it more precise. Let's click the pencil, and instead of all link clicks, I will select some link clicks, and I want this trigger to be activated only when click classes contains or maybe even equals the menu link without quotation marks. So copy this and paste it right here. Then let's rename this trigger to link click menu item or something like that and hit save. So the trigger is now more precise. Let's create a tag that will send an event to Google Analytics for. Let's go to tags, and for every event or maybe group of events that you want to send to Google Analytics, you will need to create a tag. The type of that tag will be GA4 event. So let's click new, tag configuration, Google Analytics, and then GA4 event. Here we have to enter the measurement ID. That measurement ID can be found in the admin panel of Google Analytics. So let's go to admin, then data streams, website data stream, and then copy the measurement ID. Paste it right here, and then we have to come up with some event name. If you check the list of recommended events or automatically tracked events, you will not find anything related specifically to menu items. That's why we can call this event however we want. For example, menu link click, like that. Then together with this event, we should also send some additional data, because just the fact that we have this event will not tell us which links were clicked the most. So let's take a look at what we have in the preview mode. We have things like click text, and we also have click URL. So maybe we should send them to Google Analytics, because then we will know which links were clicked the most. That's why in the tag, we have event parameters section. And here we can include additional event parameters. Below this video, you will find a link to a documentation of enhanced measurement. And here you will see what kind of events are automatically tracked and their parameters. So I don't see the reason why we should not reuse them. Let's reuse them. For example, we could reuse link URL for the URL of the link, and then we can also send link text, because at least most of these parameters are automatically recognized by Google Analytics. So I will go to Google Tag Manager and will enter link text, and you can even see the check mark that this is a known parameter for Google Analytics. And then we can add another parameter, which is link URL. Now, what kind of values should we insert here? If we just type something like menu link 1, it will be a static text, and every time this tag fires, we will get the same value. Now, we want to fetch the value dynamically, and as you can see, if we look at the click URL on this event and then on this event, their values are changing. So we can use variables to dynamically fetch certain values. That's why we can go back to Google Tag Manager, and instead of this static value, we will insert a variable. Click this button and then select click text. So click text's value will be used for the link text parameter. Then let's do the same thing here and select click URL. When this tag fires, Google Tag Manager will fetch these values and will insert them as values of these parameters, and this will be sent to this data stream. Now the triggering, that's the easy part. We already have the trigger, so click anywhere and select link click menu item. Finally, let's name this tag. I usually name them like that, GA4 event, and then the name of the event. Click save. The tag is created. Let's test it. Click preview to refresh the preview mode. Preview mode has connected. Let's go to the website, and I will click the first link, second link, third link. I don't need these tabs, so I will close this. And then, just for testing purposes, let's click one more link. For example, I will click this. This is not a menu link, so I would expect my tag to fire on this link. Let's go to the preview mode, and here we see 4 link clicks. Even though, remember, we configured our trigger to fire on menu links, so we expected to see 3 link clicks. Now let's see what is happening. I click the first link click, the tag fired. On this, the tag fired, and on this, the tag fired as well. So these were menu link clicks. But on this, the tag did not fire. Now, this is how event tracking is working in Google Tag Manager. If you configure a certain trigger, it might fire more, but what's important is whether the tag actually fired because of that event. I don't want to overwhelm you right now with too many technical details, but here what's important is that the tag did not fire. So this behavior is correct. You will keep seeing link clicks on all link clicks that happen on a page, but your tags must fire only when their conditions are met. For example, here, if I click on this, click on a tag, and then I look at the conditions, you will see that the click classes was this, and the condition was met. Then we were looking for a link click event, and that's exactly what we got. And ignore this third option because it's more technical, and that's just how triggers work under the hood in Google Tag Manager. And if we switch to values, we will see what is happening, and this is working. Ignore the bug. Right now, if I waited for, I don't know, maybe several more minutes and then reloaded the preview mode, it would be displayed properly. In fact, that's exactly what happened just now. I paused the video, I closed both of these tabs, and I launched the preview mode again. And now I see the tag type correctly. So if I click the link right here, and then I go to the preview mode, select link click, and since the tag type is now recognized properly, I can click it and I can see what kind of things were sent to Google Analytics. Since I have switched to values, I can see that together with this event, we are sending this parameter and this was its value. The same applies to this parameter and this is its value. Everything is working properly. Now, the next step would be to check the debug view and verify that these events were received by the property. So let's go to admin, then data display, debug view, and here we have that event. We should have more somewhere. We don't see it because sometimes there is a weird delay in the debug view. Eventually those events should appear, or if you wait for 24 or 48 hours, they would definitely appear in the reports. Let's see what we have in this event. So we have some automatically tracked stuff, and also we have our two parameters and their correct values. Now, if you're wondering where can you see that data later in Google Analytics 4 reports, I don't have enough data in this property because it's brand new, so I would need to wait for at least 24 hours, but I have some older demo property from the past. So let me show you one of the examples or one of the places where can you find that data. But if you want to learn much more about Google Analytics 4 or how to find data, how to build reports, then take a look at my Google Analytics 4 course. I will post a link to it below the video. So let's go to Explore, and then we will click blank. Here we want to see the top menu links that were clicked and how many times each link was clicked. That's why we will click a plus in the dimensions section, and we will add link URL. Click here, ignore this one, that's just my testing, and then enter link text and select it right here. Finally, we will also need to filter down just to menu link click events, and we will do that by event name, sorry, not event count, event name, and select that. Click confirm. Then let's add a metric. For now, it will be enough just to have event count, and then click confirm. Finally, double click on this dimension, and then this metric. Right now, this report includes all events, which means that not only menu link clicks, but also maybe I have some other events. And if we want to narrow down just to menu link clicks, we can do that by going to filters and then selecting event name, exactly matches, and then type menu link click and then apply. Now, I don't have any data because those menu link clicks happened way in the past. Right now, I'm looking just at the last 28 days. But if I change this to, let's say, last 12 months and then apply, I will see the data. This is the link URL, this is the link text, and how many times this link was clicked. Now you should have a better understanding of what Google Tag Manager is and how to use it. But keep in mind that this is just the very first step of your journey. There are many other things that you will need to learn about Google Tag Manager. That's where my full course for beginners will help. This video that you're watching right now explained around 10% of what a beginner should know. The rest 90% are explained in my course, which is called Google Tag Manager Masterclass for Beginners. I will post a link to it below the video. If you found this video useful, hit the like button. That will help me understand what videos do you like and what should I create in the future. Also, if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics, then subscribe to this channel. My name is Julius, this is Analytics Mania, and I'll see you in the next video.